The fluorescent lights of Mercy General Hospital buzzed overhead like dying insects, casting harsh shadows across the sterile waiting room. Marcus Williams pushed his mop bucket with the same gentle precision he used each morning to braid his 7-year-old daughter's hair. At just 23 years old, his broad shoulders had already begun to stoop from countless nights spent scrubbing floors after Lily had gone to sleep. He moved through the hospital corridors like a ghost, unseen by most yet essential to all. The calluses on his hands, stained permanently by industrial cleaner, told the story of a man who had once dreamed of engineering school, but traded it all for the crushing weight of single fatherhood. Lily's mother had walked away without so much as a backward glance. Since then, Marcus had built a life out of routine and sacrifice. But on this particular Tuesday evening, as autumn rain drummed against the hospital windows, Marcus would learn that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can shift the entire axis of someone's world. The pediatric wing was unusually quiet when he heard it, a sound that shattered his practiced indifference like breaking glass. Somewhere beyond the reception desk a child was crying, not the shallow sobs of a scraped knee or a tantrum over candy, but deep, soul-wrenching cries, pure, desperate terror. Marcus froze, his mop dripping onto the freshly cleaned floor. 3 years of night shifts had taught him to keep his head down, to mop around the drama and dysfunction that haunted these halls. But this cry was different. It took him back to those first painful months after Lily's mother left, when nightmares pulled her from sleep and she ran into his arms, seeking the comfort only a parent could give. Following the sound, Marcus rounded the corner and spotted a little girl, no older than 6, pressed against the wall near the elevators. Her pristine white dress, the kind that probably cost more than Marcus earned in a month, was now wrinkled and stained with tears. Her dark hair hung in perfect ringlets around a mascara-smeared face, and her small hands trembled as she covered her ears, trying to shut out the world. The waiting area was empty except for a woman in a sharp business suit, pacing near the windows with her phone pressed to her ear. She spoke in clipped, urgent tones about stock prices and board meetings, completely unaware or uncaring of the little girl's silent unraveling just 20 feet away. Marcus glanced around, expecting anyone, to step in and comfort the girl. But the nurses were busy behind their station, the woman in the business suit remained locked in her phone call, and the few other visitors sat lost in their own private worries. The little girl stayed frozen in fear, unnoticed despite her obvious distress. Setting his mop bucket aside, Marcus knelt down carefully beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said softly, using the same gentle tone he always used when Lily woke from bad dreams. "Rough night? What's your name?" The girl looked up at him through tear-filled eyes, so wide they seemed to swallow her small face. "Sophie," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the hum of the hospital lights. "That's a beautiful name," Marcus replied with a warm smile. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small bottle of bubble solution, a habit left over from Lily's toddler years, when a few floating bubbles could fix almost anything. "You know what, Sophie? I bet you've never seen hospital bubbles before." He twisted off the cap, dipped the small wand, and gently blew a stream of shimmering bubbles into the cold fluorescent air. They caught the overhead light and shimmered like tiny planets, floating between them in a moment of quiet magic. Sophie's sobbing slowly softened as her eyes tracked the bubbles drifting and popping around her. One landed on her nose, and despite the tears still clinging to her cheeks, a small, fragile smile began to form. "My daddy used to blow bubbles," she said quietly, reaching out to touch one before it burst against her fingertip. "Before he got sick." Marcus felt a tight pull in his chest. There was weight in her words, the way she spoke of her father in the past tense. He knew that kind of grief. Children didn't express it like adults. They carried it openly, painfully, without the layers of protection time builds. "Tell me about your daddy," Marcus said gently, still blowing bubbles as he settled into a more comfortable spot on the floor beside her. "He's really sick," Sophie replied, her voice a little stronger now as she watched the bubbles dance. "The doctors use big words I don't understand, but Mommy cries when she thinks I'm not looking. She's been on the phone all day, with work people I think, and I know she's scared too, but she doesn't talk to me about it." Marcus glanced toward the woman still pacing by the windows, and suddenly he understood. It wasn't neglect, it was panic. The kind of fear that makes you cling to whatever control you can find, even if it's a spreadsheet or a business call, because everything that really matters is slipping beyond your reach. "Sometimes grown-ups forget," Marcus said softly, blowing a big bubble that made Sophie giggle, "that kids need to talk about the scary stuff too. When my little girl gets scared," Marcus said softly, "we make up stories about where the bubbles go when they pop." "Where do they go?" Sophie asked, her fear momentarily forgotten. "Well," Marcus said, his voice shifting into the comforting melodic tone he used for Lily's bedtime stories. Some people think they just disappear, but I like to believe they float up to a special place where all the wishes live. Every time you make a wish on a bubble before it pops, it carries that wish to the wish keepers. Sophie's eyes widened. Really? Really? Marcus smiled. Want to try? For the next 20 minutes, Marcus blew bubble after bubble, and Sophie whispered her wishes into each one. For her daddy to get better, for her mommy to stop crying, for the scary machines to go quiet. With every bubble that burst, her breathing grew steadier, her tears dried, and something soft and bright, almost like hope, began to return to her eyes. Across the room, the woman in the business suit, Sophie's mother, had ended her phone call. She stood silently watching them. Her face was unreadable at first, but when her eyes met Marcus's, he saw it. Gratitude mixed with disbelief, as if she couldn't quite understand how a janitor in a faded uniform had done what she hadn't been able to. She walked over slowly, her heels clicking against the linoleum floor. "Sophie," she said gently, "the doctor wants to see us now." The little girl's face tensed again, fear threatening to creep back in, but Marcus placed a warm, steady hand on her small shoulder. "Hey," he said softly, "remember what we said about the bubbles?" Sophie nodded solemnly. "I want you to take this with you." Marcus handed her the small bottle of bubble solution. "Whenever you get scared, just remember, somewhere out there, all your wishes are floating around, waiting to come true." Sophie gripped the bottle tightly and walked toward the elevator with her mother. Just before they stepped inside, the woman turned back to Marcus. "Thank you," she said quietly. But Marcus heard more in those 2 words than most people say in a lifetime. 3 days later, Marcus was finishing up his shift when he found an envelope in his employee mailbox. Inside was a check, an amount that made his hands tremble, enough to pay off his student loans, catch up on rent, and maybe even start the college fund for Lily he'd only dared to dream about. But it was the note tucked behind the check that brought tears to his eyes. "Dear Marcus, Sophie's surgery was successful. When she woke up, the first thing Sophie asked for was her bubbles. The doctor said her attitude during the procedure was nothing short of remarkable. They had never seen a child face something so difficult with such calm and hope. You gave my daughter something I couldn't," the letter read. "The belief that magic still exists in dark places. I've been so focused on managing the crisis that I forgot to simply be present for her fear. You showed me what real strength looks like, not in boardrooms or bank accounts, but in the willingness to kneel beside a scared child and blow bubbles until the world makes sense again. I've established a scholarship fund in your name at the local community college. It's time for you to chase the dreams you put on hold. Some people change the world through grand gestures, but you showed me that the most profound transformations happen in quiet, ordinary moments of human connection. Thank you for reminding me what matters most. Victoria Chen, CEO, Chen Industries, and more importantly, Sophie's mom." 2 years later, Marcus walked proudly across the graduation stage, his engineering degree finally in hand. The auditorium erupted in applause. In the crowd, Lily cheered wildly, seated between Victoria and Sophie Chen, who had long since become family in all the ways that truly matter. Sophie, now healthy and radiant, stood up in the aisle, blowing bubbles into the air. Each one shimmered in the stage lights, carrying with them silent wishes for Marcus's bright future. As Marcus looked out at the faces of the people who had believed in him, he thought back to that quiet Tuesday night in a hospital corridor. A mop, a scared child, a bottle of bubbles. He had learned something profound, that kindness is never wasted, that the smallest gestures can spark the greatest change, that sometimes simply seeing someone's pain and choosing to meet it with compassion is enough to alter the course of multiple lives. The bubbles Sophie blew that day floated upward toward the auditorium ceiling, carrying the wishes of a janitor who became an engineer, a little girl who found courage, and a mother who remembered that success isn't measured in dollars, but in the moments when we choose to lift each other up. In a world that often feels harsh and indifferent, Marcus Williams had proven that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear janitor uniforms and carry bubble solution in their pockets, ready to create magic for anyone brave enough to believe in the power of human kindness.